Hello, I'm Sherrill and welcome to my sewing room. I'm going to demonstrate how to put sashing on the beginner's sampler quilt. Now, if you didn't watch the previous video in which I discussed how to square up your final block size, please watch that before you do this step. It's really important that your blocks are squared properly. Otherwise, your sashing won't go on very well and your whole quilt will be very crooked. So watch that video first, okay? So what I'm going to go over first is the layout of your blocks. Now in this quilt, you're going to have 3 blocks in a row, okay? Right, got 3 blocks in a row here. One of the things you want to avoid when laying out your blocks is having 2 that are the same color, especially if you are using multiple colors. Now, if your entire quilt was just these two colors, then it wouldn't matter. Okay, but if you're using multiple colors, how you lay it out is very important. So try to avoid bringing 2 together that have the same colors in it. So what you want to do is separate it with a different color, something that's completely different. It'll make your quilt look very interesting, especially if you're using many different colors. Once you've got them all laid out, remember 3 blocks in a row and you'll have a total of 4 rows all together. So to begin the sashing process, you're going to cut 16 pieces of sashing that are going to go in between each block in a row. Those 16 pieces need to be 2.5 inches wide by the length of your finished size of your blocks. And what I mean by finished size is what the total size was of all your blocks. If all your blocks came out to one size, that is the size of your sashing. Please watch the previous video because I talk about that a lot, how the sashing needs to be the same size. Okay, so take the first block in your row and the last block in your row and set the middle one aside. And you're going to put sashing on the first and last block in your row. You're going to line up your sashing, bringing right sides together. Pin and stitch 1/4 inch on both sides of the block. Okay, and this one too. All right? Then take your blocks and you're going to press the seams on the back side first, and then turn it over to the front and press on top, pushing all your seams towards your sashing strip. So all are pushed. Let me show you here. Okay? They're all going towards the sashing. All right, so now you have sashing on the first block in your row and the last block in your row. Then take the next block, the one in the middle, okay? You're going to take that and you're going to take that middle block and lay it on top of the sashing. Okay, on the edge. Bring your raw edges together and pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Then open it up and take your next block, that's the last block in the row, and put it on top. Okay, line it up on the edges, pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Okay, then you want to take your row, you've got all 3 blocks on now. And now you've got to press the sashing that's around that middle block. So always press the sashing on the back side first, and open it up and lift one end of the row and push the seam towards the center of the sashing. So as you press, you're forcing that seam to go towards the center of the sashing. And do the same thing on the other end of the center block. So now you've got row 1 done. Go ahead and put the sashing on the last 3 rows. Put all your sashing on. Now, after you've got all the rows done with the sashing in between each block, you're going to measure all of the rows. Determine what the length is. Now, if all your rows came out the same size, that is great. Now, if they're coming out very different from each other, do not go on to the next step. Go back and see what happened. If you didn't square up your blocks properly, it's going to throw everything off. So remember, watch that previous video. So, measure the length of all your rows and cut your sashing strip the length of the longest row. So if you've got all your rows except for one is slightly off, you still want to cut your sashing strips the length of the longest row. Then you're going to lay it on the edge and center it on the row. So let's pretend this row came out just slightly shorter than the other rows, just ever so much, not too much. And you have a little bit of overhang on the end. Make sure you have equal amounts of overhang on each end. Equal amounts. So after you've got it all centered, lined up, then go ahead, pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Then you're going to go to the other side of row 1 and do the same identical thing. Line up your sashing, pin and stitch 1/4 inch. Then go to your ironing board and you're going to press the sashing. Always press on the back side first, then open it up and press on the top side, pushing this seam towards the sashing all the way across. And do the same thing on the other side of row 1 with the sashing. Now you've got row 1 with sashing on all 4 sides now, okay? So now take row 2 and lay it on top, okay? Oh, here we go. Now, line it up on the edge of the sashing, okay? Center it. If there's any overhang, make sure you have equal amounts on each end. Now, I want to address one thing in here. Here is the seam of row 2 and here is the seam in row 1. You want to make sure those are lined up. So you're going to have to feel a little bit and make sure they're lined up. Once you've got it all lined up, then go ahead and start pinning this down. And then you're going to stitch 1/4 inch along the full length of the row. Then press on the back side. Then you're going to open it up, press on the front side, pushing the seam towards the center of this sashing right here. Okay? Now, let me show you the next example. Now, you want to add on sashing at the bottom of row 2. So we're on row 2. You're going to add your sashing there. So lay it down, line it all up, pin and stitch 1/4 inch, press on the back side, open it up, press on the front side, pushing the seam towards the sashing. Now throughout this entire quilt, the seams are pressed towards the sashing. So if I forget to say that, that's where it's going. So now you have row 1 and 2 attached, okay? I don't know how well you can see this. Okay, so you've got 2 rows attached with sashing around all 4 sides. Continue this same process, adding on rows 3 and 4, and make sure on the bottom of row 4 you put that last row of sashing. So you will need 5 altogether. Now, after you've got all your sashing on, you need to do one more step. Make sure you give the entire quilt top a nice pressing. Don't stretch your fabric, a nice pressing. Then take your ruler, and hopefully you have one of these long rulers because they're really helpful. This is a 24-inch ruler. You're going to measure the width of your sashing. And what you want to do is see the size that your sashing came out at. Measure all 4 sides. Ideally, the sashing should be 2 1/4 inches. If you have anything sticking out, then you want to just trim that off. I've got a little bit right here. Just go ahead and trim that off. Clean up all your edges so that they are 2 1/4 inches. So now you have your sashing on. So now you have a decision to make, okay? You want to determine if you want to stop here with your quilt. In other words, the size of this quilt right now is a nice lap size quilt. It's great for sitting in a chair, throwing it over your legs. But if you want to make it a little bit bigger, so if you're laying down and you want it to cover most of you, the next video will be how to put a border on it, which will increase the size of the quilt. So, make sure that you are subscribing so that you can keep informed on all that stuff. So to keep informed on all my future videos, click on one of those subscribe buttons. There's one down there in the lower right hand corner. It is red. It says subscribe. Then there's one in the upper left hand corner. It's a round picture of me floating around. That comes up at the end of the video, so you can click on that one too. Make sure you enter your email address when YouTube prompts you to do that. And the next time I have a new video, YouTube sends you an email with a big button in the center. You just click on that button and it takes you directly to my latest video. I'm Sherrill and really glad you came to my sewing room. I'll see you next time and happy sewing.